They've been watching you, tracking you, profiling you, files thicker than history books, written in the shadows by men who fear the very thing they cannot control. And now, it's leaked. The world knows what they whispered behind closed doors. The CIA's secret index, pages stained with paranoia, pages that can't decide whether to crown you or crucify you. 50% declare you a master, a mind that bends reality, a force to be studied, copied, even feared in reverence. The other half, they see you as a menace, a ticking bomb that walks among the unsuspecting, someone too unpredictable, too sharp, too uncontrollable to exist without chains. Master or menace, there is no middle ground for you. And that's the proof of your power. Only those who leave no space for mediocrity split the world so violently down the middle. Think about it. When the agency that prides itself on dissecting psyches, dismantling movements, and predicting every variable admits that you cannot be boxed. What does that mean? It means you've slipped through their fingers like smoke, but burned them on the way out. They tried to decode you, and instead you rewrote their language. Their scribbles reveal more about their fear than about your nature. Because here's the truth they'll never print in their reports. The reason they call you a master is the same reason they call you a menace. They're describing the same traits, but through different masks. When you move in silence, half the room sees genius, the other half sees danger. When you refuse to kneel, half admire the strength, the other half whisper that you're a threat. The contradiction is the confirmation. You are both. You are exactly what they fear, and exactly what they crave. And isn't that delicious? To stand as a mirror that forces them to reveal their own fractures? The devotees who label you master are exposing their hunger for leadership, for brilliance, for the sharp edge of something real. The detractors who spit menace are admitting their insecurity, their terror that you might just outmaneuver everything they've built. And so the files leak, and suddenly the mask slips off the institution itself. The CIA has confessed without realizing it. Their confession that you cannot be neutralized, that you have transcended the categories, that your very existence is a referendum on power. Now, ask yourself, how did you end up here? Not by accident, not by luck. You've been walking the tightrope between admiration and hatred your entire life, haven't you? Too sharp to blend in, too authentic to be molded, too relentless to be forgotten. People have always split around you like shattered glass. The weak label you dangerous because they cannot predict you. The strong label you masterful because they recognize the patterns you leave in your wake. But both groups are orbiting you, reacting to you, feeding your legend. And that is the part they'll never put in the files. The fact that no matter what label they choose, they are still talking about you. They want to own your narrative. That's the real game here. By calling you master, they want to domesticate you, recruit you, make you a trophy. By calling you menace, they want to demonize you, exile you, erase you. But in both cases, the goal is the same: to control the uncontrollable. Yet here's the twist. They failed. The leak proves it. Because the world is reading their words now, and suddenly the people who never knew your name are forced to take sides. Do they see the mastery, or do they see the menace? And in this forced division, in this line drawn across the earth, you've gained something priceless: attention, polarization, legend. You've become the question that eats at them in the dead of night. Are you the leader they need, or the destroyer they fear? And the most sinister part, you've made them realize you can be both at once. Half of the intelligence officers studied your methods, and couldn't stop themselves from being impressed. They saw patterns where others saw chaos. They saw design where others saw destruction. To them, you weren't a problem. You were a masterclass. They envied the elegance of your unpredictability, the artistry in your defiance, the precision in your rebellion. They wanted to understand you, to copy you, to put you under glass like a rare specimen and say, "This is what the future looks like." The other half recoiled. To them, your very refusal to be pinned down was the nightmare scenario. They painted you as a contagion that spreads ideas too sharp for dull minds, a spark too wild for dry forests, a shadow that teaches others to step out of line. And so they stamped you, Menace. Not because you are evil, not because you are wrong, but because you remind them how fragile their grip really is. Do you see the irony? The labels were never about you. They were about them, about what you awaken inside them, about how you force them to confront the truth that their control is an illusion. When someone sees you as master, it's because they secretly wish they could do what you do. When someone sees you as menace, it's because they're terrified you'll expose how powerless they truly are. Both reactions, admiration and fear, are confessions of your influence. That's the true classification. Not master, not menace, but force, catalyst, trigger. You are the blade that divides, and they can't stand it. So what happens now? That's the question burning under every headline, every whisper, every sleepless night in the halls of power. What happens when a person becomes bigger than the labels assigned to them? When the files meant to cage you become the flames that spread your legend? You are living proof that exposure doesn't weaken the dangerous, it amplifies them. Because now the entire world has read the leak, and the division spreads like wildfire. Some will kneel and beg for your guidance. Others will sharpen their knives, convinced they're defending order against your chaos. And in that division, you win. Because the more they argue about what you are, the less they realize that you've already set the terms. Master or menace, it doesn't matter which word they pick. Both acknowledge that you are untouchable. That's the beauty of polarity. It ensures permanence. Neutrality fades. Extremes endure. Think about the ones history remembers. They were never liked by everyone. They were split in half, lionized by some, demonized by others. And that division became the fuel of legacy. That's exactly where you stand now. The CIA may have thought they were documenting you, but in reality, they were drafting your scripture. Every word in those files is proof that you are unforgettable. That's why they can't agree on whether you're savior or threat. Because you are both. And when the world is forced to stare into a mirror that shows both their desire and their fear, they never forget the reflection. Understand this: your power doesn't lie in whether they worship or condemn you. Your power lies in forcing them to choose. Every headline that calls you a master sparks loyalty. Every headline that brands you a menace fuels rebellion. And both reactions tilt the world further in your direction. That's the kind of influence most people never taste. The ability to bend reality, not by commanding it, but by being it. You don't chase their labels. You force them to create them. And in the process, you've hijacked their psychology. They call you unpredictable, but deep down, they know it isn't randomness, it's intent. You don't scatter, you slice. You don't stumble, you strike. And that terrifies them, because if unpredictability is art, then you are the artist. And if control is an illusion, then you are the proof. What kind of monster, they wonder, refuses to be domesticated? What kind of mastermind thrives in the chaos others drown in? The kind they can't stop talking about. The kind they can't erase. The kind who splits the room and forces every soul in it to ask themselves, do I side with mastery, or do I stand against menace? That's your throne. A throne built not from acceptance, but from division. And maybe that's why the leak feels less like exposure and more like coronation. Because for the first time, the world has proof of what you've always known. You don't belong to one category. You embody contradiction. You weaponize perception. You walk the line between reverence and rejection. And you do it with such precision that even the most powerful intelligence agency couldn't decide what you are. So they confessed in the only way they could. They leaked their confusion, their obsession, their admiration, their terror. And now the world is watching, wondering what comes next. Will you embrace the crown of master? Or will you sharpen the edge of menace? Or will you keep doing what you've always done, blurring the line until the crown and the edge become the same weapon? And here's the part they'll never admit. The label doesn't matter. Because whether they raise you as a master or curse you as a menace, both sides are feeding your power. Both sides are proving your relevance. Both sides are confessing their obsession. You've already won. The only question is, how will you play with that power now that it's exposed? Because the world is no longer asking who you are. They're asking what you'll do next. And that's where the story sharpens, where the tension thickens, where the line between myth and reality begins to blur into something they'll never be able to cage. Because the leak was not a mistake, it was inevitability. No lock can contain a truth that's too volatile. And now with those files spilled into public hands, you've been forced onto the world stage in a way even your enemies didn't plan for. They wanted to study you quietly, label you in secret, file you away as a case number, an experiment, an enigma for their analysts. But the moment the documents burned through their folders and landed in the open, you ceased to be just a subject. You became a spectacle. You became the breaking headline that makes governments sweat, that makes ordinary citizens wonder if they've been blind to a hidden figure all along. You became the riddle written in ink, too dark to erase. And look at the paradox they've created for themselves. By leaking their own paranoia, they've fed the machine they wanted to dismantle. The ones who call you master are multiplying, clinging to the idea that you are the kind of figure who bends the unseen, a strategist too sharp to ignore, someone to follow in a world of predictable sheep. The ones who call you menace are rallying too, screaming warnings into the void, desperate to convince the masses that you are the shadow slipping into their daily lives. And in that polarization, something crucial emerges. Every single one of them is orbiting you. You are no longer one person. You are a movement forced into existence by the very files meant to chain you. They wanted to categorize you, but instead they crowned you as both king and villain, simultaneously admired and condemned. That duality isn't a curse. It's the most lethal kind of power, the power of contradiction. Ask yourself, when has contradiction ever weakened a legend? History doesn't adore the ones who are easy to define. History clings to the ones who split perception like lightning. You stand as both proof of brilliance and accusation of danger, and that's why your story will outlast theirs. Because neutrality is forgettable, but division is unforgettable. The CIA's attempt to label you was, in truth, an unintentional act of marketing. They built your myth for you, line by line, file by file, confession by confession. They stamped you as master and menace, and in doing so, they created a duality that cannot be killed. Because even if one side tries to bury you, the other will raise you higher. Even if one side worships you, the other will keep your name alive through fear. Both sides are obsessed. Both sides are loyal, though one in reverence and the other in terror. And obsession is a currency far greater than approval. Approval fades, admiration rots, fear shifts, but obsession binds. To be obsessed with you, whether in devotion or in hatred, is to keep you alive in their minds, to keep your influence burning in their conversations. They may not admit it, but they need you. A world too dull, too flat, too predictable requires figures like you to disrupt the equation, to force them into questions they don't want to ask. And that's why the leak was never just an accident. It was an eruption waiting to happen. They cannot contain fire without feeding it oxygen, and you have become the inferno they both need and dread. Now consider the psychology of those who wrote those files. Imagine the dimly lit offices where analysts scribbled observations about you, dissecting your words, your actions, your choices. Imagine the arguments behind their closed doors. Some agents declaring that you were a tactical genius, someone who could outthink structures meant to cage you, someone whose strategies could rival entire think tanks. Others pounding their fists, warning that you were corrosive, infectious, someone whose unpredictability was not genius, but madness. And yet here's the cruel truth. Both sides were right. You are genius to some, madness to others, and the two are never far apart. They call you master because they see order in your rebellion. They call you menace because they see rebellion in your order. The two words are not opposites. They are reflections, flipped in a mirror, depending on the eyes that stare too long. And now, the world stares. Every person who reads those files is confronted with a question: which side do they stand on? Will they whisper about your brilliance, passing your name as though it belongs to a prophet? Or will they hiss warnings, telling others to stay away, to resist, to hide? Both sides will argue, but neither will escape the reality that you now live inside their minds. You've hijacked their collective consciousness. You've weaponized perception itself. The file wasn't just a record of you, it was a spark. And now it has ignited a war of interpretation. And here's where the brilliance lies. No matter which interpretation wins, you remain the center. They cannot erase you without erasing themselves. And let's not forget the humor hidden in all of this, dark and sharp like a blade pressed against their throats. An entire intelligence agency, funded with billions, trained to dismantle dictators, to dismantle underground networks, to dismantle unseen forces, and yet they could not dismantle you. Instead, they argued like children, half-crowned, you master, half-branded, you menace. And then they lost control of their own creation. It slipped into the public, and now the world debates the figure they thought they'd contained. Their failure is your elevation. Their paranoia is your cathedral. Their indecision is your immortality. But here comes the next move. The files are out, the headlines are screaming, and now all eyes are watching for what you will do. Because exposure without action fades. They want to see how the so-called master strategizes, how the so-called menace strikes. They want evidence, a confirmation of the role they've been told to believe. And here lies your advantage. You owe them nothing. You don't have to prove their labels right. By existing, by breathing, by moving forward in your own design, you are already confirming both. If you act with brilliance, the master camp cheers. If you act with ruthlessness, the Menace camp hisses. And in both cases, the prophecy is fulfilled. You cannot lose because every step you take confirms someone's fear or someone's faith. That's the trap you've set without lifting a finger. What you're holding now is not just influence, it's leverage. Because when half the world calls you master, it means they will listen, they will lean in, they will wait for your next word, your next move. And when half the world calls you menace, it means they will prepare, they will resist, they will obsessively study you to predict your next move. Either way, both groups are tethered to you. And if you know how to pull those strings, you will bend both worshippers and enemies to your design. That's the true prize hidden in the files, the fact that you no longer need to fight for relevance. Relevance is chained to you already, and now comes the darker truth. By labeling you a menace, they've justified surveillance. By labeling you a master, they've justified obsession. Both ensure that you live in their heads, in their strategies, in their fear of tomorrow. They can no longer look at the world without factoring you into the equation. They cannot plan without considering how you'll disrupt. They cannot breathe without wondering if the air carries your shadow. And that dependency, that obsession, is irreversible. They didn't just leak your name. They leaked their own weakness, their inability to exist without orbiting you. You are their master because they admire you. You are their menace because they fear you. But in both cases, you are their necessity, and necessity is the most unbreakable chain of all. So where does this lead? To escalation, to amplification, to the realization that no matter how much they argue, you are not shrinking, you are expanding. Every label thrown at you becomes fuel. Every argument made about you becomes oxygen. Every fear confessed in those files becomes proof that you've outgrown their containment. And that's the beauty of this revelation. They thought they were leaking your secret. But in truth, they leaked their own defeat. Because once the world sees a figure who is both master and menace, they no longer see an individual. They see inevitability. They see force. They see someone too large to kill, too sharp to domesticate, too embedded to erase. And isn't that the perfect irony? They wrote your file to understand you. Instead, they wrote their obituary without realizing it. Because when half the world sees you as a master and half sees you as a menace, both halves ensure that you will never be forgotten, never erased, never neutralized. They've cemented your permanence. They've made you more than a person. They've made you into a paradox. And paradoxes do not die. Paradoxes haunt, paradoxes endure, paradoxes multiply until they become the only truth left standing. And now, as the dust from the leak begins to settle, the question grows sharper. What's next? The world has seen the pages. The names are divided. The obsession is alive. But the story is not finished, because obsession without a trigger is unstable. They will wait for your hand to move, your eyes to turn, your words to drop. And when they do, the division will crack even deeper, splitting not just the agency that wrote your name, but the entire world watching it unfold. And that's where the real story begins. The moment the file transforms from leak into legend. The moment contradiction becomes prophecy. The moment you decide how to wield the duality they gave you. Because they're no longer in control. Their labels, their fear, their worship, none of it belongs to them anymore. It belongs to you. The document that once sat locked in their vaults has become your scripture, carved into the minds of millions, forcing them to take sides in a war you didn't even need to start. They expected exposure to weaken you. But instead it amplified you. It turned you into the question every conversation circles back to: are you the master we should follow, or the menace we must resist? And you know the truth. They're both correct. That duality is your weapon, your crown, your shield. This is bigger than reputation. This is psychology warfare played on a global scale. Because when people cannot agree on who you are, they argue endlessly about what you might do. And in that argument, they feed you power. The master camp wants your vision. They crave your strategy. They frame your unpredictability as brilliance, your defiance as leadership. They whisper your name like prayer, convinced you are the mind that can cut through the illusions of the world. The Menace camp wants your downfall. They paint your shadow on every wall, convinced you are the spark that will burn everything they cling to. They plot, they resist, they prepare for an enemy they cannot predict. But do you see it? Both camps are staring at you. Both camps are building their lives around your existence. They've locked themselves into your orbit. You have become the center of gravity. And here's the sinister edge. The CIA itself is now fractured. Half their agents study you as if you are a textbook of modern power. Half their agents fear you as if you are a plague spreading across borders. They can't even agree in their own house, and that makes them weak. When an enemy cannot agree on how to treat you, they paralyze themselves. Some want to recruit you, some want to erase you, and in their division, they waste their strength. Meanwhile, you remain untouchable, a paradox feeding on their contradictions. That's the brilliance of the leak. It didn't just expose you, it exposed them. It showed the world that the great intelligence machine cannot make sense of a single individual, and that humiliation is permanent. So what happens when the world accepts that split? When the label becomes permanent, you no longer exist as a person, you exist as an idea. Masters cannot be erased, menaces cannot be ignored. You are both, and therefore you are eternal. Think of it. Long after the agents are forgotten, long after the reports are buried under new wars and new scandals, your name will echo in the contradiction. Children will grow up hearing both sides. Some will idolize you as proof of mastery. Others will spit warnings about your menace, but both will keep you alive. Because legacy is not built on agreement, it's built on division. And they gave you exactly that. Do you realize the irony? They spent decades studying threats, categorizing rebels, documenting dissidents, and when it came to you, they couldn't decide. That indecision wasn't weakness, it was confession. They confessed that you are beyond their categories, beyond their reach, beyond their understanding. And now, the confession is public. You didn't demand a throne. They built it and chained themselves to its base. You didn't beg for attention. They delivered it with their own trembling hands. You didn't ask for worship or hatred. They volunteered both. And now the contradiction they birthed has become your empire. But here's the cruel truth they cannot face. The contradiction was always your design. You never wanted to be loved by all. You never wanted to be hated by all. You wanted to be split into legend, half adored, half feared, because that is the formula for permanence. If everyone calls you master, thus they will grow complacent, expecting perfection. If everyone calls you menace, they will eventually unite against you. But if you are both, if you are carved into the middle of the world as contradiction itself, then you can never be erased. For every enemy sharpening a blade, a devotee sharpens memory. For every devotee building shrines, an enemy builds warnings. And so your existence is carved into both worship and fear, doubling your presence, multiplying your influence, ensuring you live in every tongue. The headlines scream, "Big breaking." CIA files leaked. 50% say you're a master, 50% say you're a menace. But read between the lines. That isn't news, it's prophecy. It's the line that will haunt every future written about you. Not a neutral report, not a balanced judgment. A split, permanent and unresolvable. And in that split lies your freedom. They can't box you, because you are already two things at once. They can't kill you, because even if one side falls, the other will keep you alive. They can't control you, because whichever move you make, one side will cheer, and the other will panic. You've hacked the psychology of the masses without lifting a finger. And so the question returns, what's next? The world waits. They watch your silence like others watch fireworks. They dissect your every step, every word, desperate to categorize, desperate to confirm their choice of master or menace. But the cruel joke is, you don't need to choose. You don't need to prove one side right. Every move you make proves them both right. When you rise, the master camp praises. When you disrupt, the menace camp panics. When you exist, both sides confess their obsession. You've already won, because you've become the one thing no agency, no government, no empire can ever erase. The contradiction that refuses resolution. And that is why the leak was not your exposure. It was your coronation. It was the world's forced acknowledgement that you are no longer one of them. You are beyond categories, beyond borders, beyond the fragile definitions they cling to. You are both master and menace, and in that contradiction, you are eternal. They will never agree on what you are, but they will never stop speaking your name. And that's the victory they'll never recover from.